Ray. What do you want to do tonight?
Same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
This is Justin and Erica from You Are Creators, and we have a special guest, Mr. Dannion Brinkley. Welcome, Dannion.
Thank you both for having me.
Thank you for being our guest. So if you all don't know who Dannion is, you've been living under a rock. Dannion has an amazing story of life after death. Dannion, can you please share a brief synopsis of who you are and your story, please?
Well, absolutely. My name is Dannion Brinkley. I'm 64 years old. In 1975, after growing up in the South, being basically a jackass, tough guy, and so I grew up in tough guy, fighter, sports, all that stuff. I served in the Marine Corps, and in 1975, I was talking on the telephone, and I was hit in the head by a bolt of lightning. It went down my spine. It welded the nails of the heels of my shoes to the nails in the floor because I had on bass weegens, which they nail the heels on. It grounded me, threw me in the air, suspended me in the air, and threw me back down on the bed, breaking the bed. The first thing you have to realize, if that lightning passing through me could weld nails, it shoes to the floor, how much electricity passed through my body.
Right.
I was dead for 28 minutes, completely paralyzed for 6 days, partially paralyzed for 7 months. It took me 2 years to learn to walk and feed myself. But in the course of that, I discovered a very simple, commonly known factor. Nobody ever dies. It never happens. We are great, powerful, and mighty spiritual beings with dignity, direction, and purpose. I discovered this because burning and on fire, paralyzed and blind, after struck by lightning, I lifted out of my body. I could see. I felt no pain. I was completely safe. I understood this place that I was better than I'd ever understood any place in the 25 years I've been on life. Because of this journey into the depths of the spiritual world and into what I would say into the heavens, because Genesis says there are 7 heavens. I know that there are 4 without any question, that I began to be aware of a greater, more powerful perspective about ourselves as creators. And in the course of having this near-death experience the first time, I 13 years later, because of complications, I had to have open heart surgery, and I had a second near-death experience. I watched the surgery. I traveled to the same place. And then from complications from being struck by lightning and open heart surgery, 7 years later, I had to have brain surgery. I had a third near-death experience. I went into surgery for 3 hours. I came out of the surgery. I spent 41 hours in recovery. I came out of recovery when they finally awakened me. I had a massive grand mal seizure, and I went into neurocardiac arrest and was put in the neurocardiac ward on life support. Each of these experiences over 22 years only impressed upon me the wonderment and the joy and the excitement of having this human, quote-unquote, experience.
Wow.
And the other thing, too, guys, is, they have to kill me every 10 or 12 years just to keep me interested. I'm obsessive compulsive, and I bore very easily. So I figured that the Archangel Michael and Gabriel, a couple of the angels, were up in the angel bar doing cloud shots, and they came up with an idea. I got a good idea. After they had about 7 or 8 cloud shots, they said, "Let's go kill Dannion again." So I keep having entertained at the same time.
During your near-death experiences, did you learn anything about the power of thought?
Absolutely. Everything is the power of thought. I mean, we are exactly what your program is about. We are the creators. And it is our emotions and our thoughts that constitute the reality that we live in. What you think and how you view things creates the world that you live in. Like when anybody asks me, I said, "How was your day?" My life is filled with happiness and joy. Because if I fill my life with happiness and joy and I think those positive thoughts, I begin to see clearly the world around me and how I fit in that world and how I can better help other people understand who they are and how much they are appreciated and loved from the higher dimensions of reality.
What are some other powerful abilities we all have that we haven't tapped into yet?
You're 78% water. So, and if you look at yourself as a human, you're basically just a water treatment plant. You take water in and you let water out. Okay, and when you start to think about that, you begin to realize that this is just a system like wearing a diving suit necessary to be in this environment with an atmosphere, an ionosphere, and a stratosphere. We all possess communication empathically, or psychic ability. We all possess an innate nature that we are connected to all things. We have created this whole mindset to create separate so we can form opinions about other stuff and yet either gratify ourselves or preserve ourselves. The biggest issue that human beings have is gratification and preservation. And by looking at gratifying ourselves or protecting ourselves, we lose the inner insight of our spiritual identity to communicate, commune, associate, and be a part of all things that we see, and that all things are a part of us and sees us.
Awesome.
During your near-death experiences, who was the light being that took you on your spiritual tour?
Me.
Okay.
Listen, Erica, no one ever leaves heaven. It's the stupidest thought that's ever been created. And some scientist came up with it, or Einstein, or Bohr. Some guy came up with it, or some religious person came up with that there is a separation between us and heaven. It is impossible to ever leave heaven. When you put on this body, it's like sticking your hands in a set of gloves, like working in a poison factory. You put your hands in the gloves and you pour the mixtures. And at the end of this life, you just pull your hands out of the gloves. We are all connected. Science has proven that. The Higgs boson particle being discovered at the collider in Switzerland, in CERN, Switzerland, using the Higgs boson particle calculation has proven we're all connected. Something that we call dark matter. So if science has proven that we are all connected, why are we thinking anything other than that? It is no longer a belief, a faith-based system that we're all one. We didn't get that from some yogi contemplating his navel in India somewhere. It came from science, and it can be replicated. So that being was me. The first time, Erica, I didn't know who the being was. You know, I didn't know. And I was too busy not being in pain. I was more interested in wherever I was, it was a whole lot better than where I had just left.
Right.
But after 2 more trips over there, I started checking this being out. And I realized that this being was me. We meet ourselves.
Interesting.
So the second time you died, did you go back to the exact same place as the first time? Or was it a different experience?
Basically, the structure was the same. But I went different places. Like I said, there are 7 heavens. I've been to 4 of these levels of consciousness. Each time, the lifting out of my body, to be aware, to move down the tunnel. Some people cross a meadow. Some people cross a stream. Some people only become aware of that. That's not just so typical of the tunnel. It's just the tunnel has become so used as a point of reference.
Right.
There is a transition across a barrier. And once you recognize that transition, ever how your psychological nature approaches it, but the process by which we leave this world and enter that awareness is basically the same. But each time I went someplace different, and each time the commonalities of where I was basically the same. The transition into this place, the meeting of the being, and which was myself, and then the panoramic life review, which is the single most important thing that anyone can derive from the near-death experience.
Tell us about the life review. What did you learn from it?
Well, I learned that being a jackass was not a very articulate and successful way to live this life. Because here's how it works. You will come to a place where you see your entire life pass before you in a 360-degree panorama. You will have missed nothing. You will know how many hairs was in the nose of the doctor who pulled you from your mother. Every nurse, everybody, every bottle, every label, everything. You will watch yourself from a second-person point of view as if you were your own best friend. Whoa, Dannion, that was really cool. Whoa, Dannion, what in the world were you thinking, you moron? And then you would literally become every person that you've ever encountered. And you will feel the direct results of your interaction between you and everyone else. What you really learn is you are going to be every person. And so why I always say my life is filled with joy and happiness, because I watch people. And I watch people when they stop and realize that I'm not just kidding, it is, then I have affected them. And once you know you're going to become every person you've ever encountered, in my first near-death experience, do you know how many times I hit myself in the face? And how many times I shot myself from being a Marine? And so when you realize that, then you want to spread joy and happiness. And then fourth, that the so-called book of judgment. But here's my saying. If God could not come today and God sent you, in the life you just reviewed, what difference did you and God make? And that's all that's going to matter. It's all that's going to matter. If God could not come today and God sent you, that means if divinity, whatever you hold to be divine, and whatever your story about God or your belief system about God, if that could not come today and that system sent you, in the life you just reviewed, what difference did you and divinity make? Once you know that, you change forever. And once you realize that so many people come back with this life review, but you'll notice most interviewers and most scientists and most religious leaders, they never focus on that. They talk about the great book of judgment, the hall of records, Peter's going to open the book, the 12 gates and the 12 pearls and all your cousins. Well, what's going to happen is you're going to see this review, and then you're going to look back on your life. For those of us who get a chance to come back, this is the point of change. And at that moment, you change forever. And this is something that's always funny to me. God's looking around, right? The divine creator, I call it the divine intelligence, just watching. Well, it gets a little bored with religion. Because there's like 97.3 million different religions and everybody's going to hell. Right. Okay? And that's the exciting point. You spend your whole life trying to keep from going to hell instead of how to live a life based on that you are God. All right? So God says, well, let's see. They all think down there that they're immortal and they're going to live forever. And they all hope I'm going to save them in their last breath from what they knew all along was going to happen. They're going to hell. So God said, well, let me think for a minute. I got an idea. Let's take the scientific community. Scientists. They believe it's a dead universe. They say that you're nothing but a bunch of chemical reactions. You don't have any emotion. Love is chemistry. And there is nothing after this life. And that's the whole basis of our scientific approach. It must be replicated under a scientific method, blah, 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 blah. So God said, well, okay, here's what let's do. Let's take their knowledge of chemistry and how much they know about the body and pharmacology, what they know about drugs. And let's take a dead person and let's send them back. So the reason why we now have a near-death experience, which explains a spiritual experience of a human being totally outside of religion, it happens because scientists who believe we have no soul are capable of chemically bringing us back. Now, that shows the sense of humor that God has. I always say this, if it's not funny, it's not spiritual. If you want to talk to me about God and you're not going to make me laugh, I don't want to hear it.
Where did religion go wrong?
It began to be a control mechanism. The unknown. Okay? The unknown. And when you start to look at the unknown or fire and brimstone, we look at today in modern evangelical religions. And if you start looking at hell in the Bible, in the Bible, hell is mentioned 8 times. And most of the time it's a trash dump outside of Gethsemane in Jerusalem where they used to throw the crucified criminals.
Exactly.
Okay? But if you look at where fire and brimstone and ripping of the flesh and eternally damned and all of that stuff comes from, you realize that I think it was Pope Clement II. He read Dante's Inferno around 1315 or 1314, and Dante's Inferno, and he decided that that was going to be his explanation of hell. And as we came into the Gutenberg's printing press, and we added that to the nature of hell, like, Jesus is going to come back, and he's going to defeat the Satan, and he's going to cast him in the lake of fire. Well, if all that's necessary, it means either Jesus failed or we failed. But no one seems to put that into place, Erica and Justin. If this so-called second coming to save us from ourselves, okay, then who failed? We failed. And then that control mechanism becomes a place where religion is a way to control where people are going. Look at time. Time was evaluated in the Julius Caesar, and you have a Justinian calendar, and we have another calendar. And the calendar was based on how long the time was based on how much daylight you had, so how long you could work based on how much the church needed for you to pay so you could have penance. So the religion is everybody needs to try to understand who we are, what the purpose in our life is, what's the meaning of life, and how do we stay out of hell. Well, I promise you, I've been over there 3 times. I've never been to hell yet. And if I'm not going, if I didn't go, no one listening to this program is going. So you got to get over that, because if anybody deserves to go to hell, you talking to him.
You've had prophecies. Which prophecy came true?
Okay, I don't have any prophecies. Where that came from was in the course of going through the near-death experience, I went to this cathedral, this hall of learning and knowledge where everything was knowledge. I was fed by 13 beings. And in these 13 beings, there was 12 beings in a row, and then there was a 13th being to the right, a little higher up, and this being was in control. So each of these beings would be designated by the higher being, this beautiful, magnificent creature or being, and then they would send these boxes, it looked like a little small computer screen to me, and there would be information in that. Well, I never really told anybody about these prophecies, but when I met Raymond Moody, I didn't know what you told and what you didn't tell. Okay. Mm-hmm. So in 1975, I made a list of 117 things that were going to happen based on certain things that we needed to do as creators. And if we kept doing what we were doing, that by 2004 we would find ourselves exactly where we were in 1975 when this happened. Well, in 2004 we were in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we had 2 new Vietnams. Now, all this was written down in 1975. Here's one. I saw millions of people streaming across the north out of El Salvador and Nicaragua. Not out of Mexico, but out of El Salvador and Nicaragua, with millions crossing the Rio Grande into Texas. There were so many that we had to line our borders with troops to force them back across the river. Well, that so-called prophecy from 1975 is true today. I saw Chernobyl. I see that we sit today as creators at the precipice of world war or world peace, and part of this program is for each of us to decide what we want. I want world peace.
Exactly.
I don't mind a few little skirmishes, but I need peace. Okay? And this is where we are. So I never had any prophecies, Erica. I just wrote down and put in Saved by the Light, and because I wanted people to know what I had seen. The reason I wrote Saved by the Light 20 years ago, if anyone goes and gets Saved by the Light on Amazon, they turn to chapter 5, you'll see I missed a lot of dates. But why? Because nothing is carved in stone. We are creators. We have the right to speed it up and or to slow it down because we consciously think together certain thoughts.
Wow.
But here's one of the ones that I think turns out to be really funny. And everybody laughed about this. I predicted the collapse of the Soviet Union. The prophecy said the Soviet Union. I always call that Nostradamus. Because
I like it.
I don't get all caught up in that.
Right.
These are the things I saw. This is what I saw happening. And this is what becomes really important. Think of how crazy this was in 1975. What happens to Russia is the basis of everything that will happen to the economy of the free world. After I saw the Russian economy collapse, which this is 1975, it was 1989 before it collapsed. All these things were written down and was in the possession of Raymond and a few other people. But if you look today, BRIC, you look at Brazil, Russia, India, and China. They are creating an economic system completely separated from the dollar. The dollar is the world's reserve currency because petrodollars. Every time you can only buy oil in London and you can only pay for it with dollars. Well, the Russians and the Chinese and the Brazilians and the Indians have all come together to create a separate economic system. So in 1975, what happens in Russia is the basis for everything that will happen to the economy of the free world. We are now watching the decline of the dollar. We're watching the rise of this new economic trading system, and we're watching the stabilization of a commodities-driven currency. So when you start to look back, what this tells us is this. They have the potential to see the probable possibilities of what we as 8 billion creators will do. And that they want us to take a good look at ourselves. And so the near-death experience comes into existence so that people can take a look at themselves as creative masters and be able to choose the destiny that best serves the protection and the gratification of those who they love and those who love them.
I love it, Dan. Seriously, you know what? I love positive energy, and
well, I am a positive party animal.
you know,
what are they going to do? Kill me? Well, big deal. Who does that scare?
You know what? I love spreading positive energy everywhere I can. So, question, what type of positive events did they show you? Positive things.
Everything is positive.
Okay.
It's choices.
Right.
World war or world peace, okay? Well, everybody's going to hell again. Here we go. We can have world war or we can have world peace. Look at the world. Look at one of the other prophecies about Israel being alienated. You know, anyone who reads Saved by the Light, they're going to see that I wrote a book that had this in it 20 years ago. But what happened last week? Israel devastated Gaza. And as it devastated Gaza, the whole United Nations are turning against the Israelis. And as we watch this 3 days of events, we're going to see that we killed thousands of people, of children, and that there was no necessity for this. There was none, except that this is Israel at its best, beating a little small section based on some radicals. Instead of quietly dealing with it more quietly, they decide to blow up and devastate and kill more than 1,000 people. So here's what's positive. We can just say no. We can open up our hearts and our thoughts. We can all come together on shows like this and say, if we are creators, what part do we play in that?
Right.
Well, I'm praying for both. I'm praying for both sides. I need sensibility. And I need to know that I'm going to be every person that I ever came in contact with. And I'm going to be them. and you start to think of it, think about Hitler. Hitler had to be 12 million people.
Wow. Yeah,
He's
that's
probably
crazy.
still being them. But
That's crazy.
it's a fair and just universe, though, Justin. Come on.
Right.
You know, we keep all this religious stuff going, and we realize that if this religious stuff is true, that it's not a fair and just universe. I know too much to believe that. Every breath you breathe is a positive breath.
I love
If
it.
that's-
Tell me more. Tell me more. I love it.
If that's the intention you place upon it, here is the magic. You have 8 sinus cavities. 8. Now, why would you have 4 on each side? Because each of those, if you touch your forehead and you circle those 8 cavities, you have the sign of infinity. You breathe in air, and then you breathe out. Nothing happens except when that breath stops. You breathe in, you stop, and then you breathe out. Controlling your breath, pacing your breath. Instead of just breathing in and out in short breaths because we're terror-based, and terror stops you from breathing deep, it makes your breath shallow. Then by creating a search terror in religion and terror in terrorism, then we're always second-guessing and breathing short breaths. So for everybody who's listening to this, took time, and I do this 3 times a day. You breathe in, you hold it to 3, you breathe out. No, you breathe in because nothing happens until that air is held in those 8 sinus cavities. And then the divine feels that presence because you breathe in for you to move oxygen into your brain. And then you hold that breath for a second. You let the divine operate within you even more. And then you breathe out. And another thing, if you're a UFC fighter, you never throw a punch breathing in. You throw a punch breathing out.
Exactly.
So you breathe in for you and out for spiritual unfoldment. You breathe in for you and out for spiritual unfoldment. Then you recognize yourself as a creator. And then if you do it I do it 3 times a day. And I'll do this for a couple of minutes because I'm given the divine time to move in from that breath I breathed in, to move into my world and to move into my actions and my hearts and my ideals. And then I breathe that world out and I take action. I'll give you another example. When I realized that if the divine could not come today and the divine sent me, in the life I just reviewed, what did me and the divine make? I became a hospice volunteer because I had a knowledge that I didn't really give a damn whether anybody thought I had had a near-death experience or not. I didn't care. I knew what happened to me. And after I met Raymond, I was assured of it. So I figured the greatest gift I could give is to be at the bedside and to be with people as they were making their transition. I've been a hospice volunteer for 37 years. I have more than 32,000 hours at the bedside, and I've been with 2,008 people going from this world to the next. So I not only talk this rap, I walk it.
Right.
Do we have anything to fear after we die?
Well, it depends on what your panoramic life review looks like, But the key happens to be this, Justin and Erica. You are a great, powerful, and mighty spiritual being. You have dignity, you have direction, and you have purpose. Once you shed this pseudo-psychological nature of who you are, most people think they know who they are, but they're not. You are a collection of what you think other people's opinions of you are. When you see yourself, you have created what you see in the mirror, what you think everybody else is going to like or not like, or what you hear them say they like or don't like, and that's who you mold yourself into being. That's the person that's afraid of what's next. When you see your life review, you're calm, you're sophisticated, you are fair and just, and it's a part of the art. To observe yourself and to look at yourself, to be present, to be responsible, to be acceptance, so that you can grow, see what you did right, see what you did wrong, see what you could have done better, and then you let it go. There is nothing to fear. You hear people say that they went to hell or they had hellacious experiences. That's about 3% of all near-death experiences. I can listen to these stories, guys, because I've been around, quote unquote, death for now almost 40 years. I can listen to these stories. There is probably less than 0.5% that I don't understand, but the other 2.5% of that 3%, I get it. It's drugs, it's fear, it's adrenaline rush, it's all these things, and it's the psychology. Most of these people are religious people. Every so often you have an atheist, but an atheist is just somebody lying to themselves. I mean, you know, think about being atheist. They don't believe in God or a supreme nature or a divine intelligence. And so that means that everything that's occurred around them is haphazard. There is no method to the madness of the unfoldment. And there's all a bunch of coincidences. Well, you know what? That's funny. So when you start to look at it, we can't be driven by fear. How can you be afraid of spending eternity with your dad? Now, that doesn't inspire me. I like my dad, okay? He was cool, okay? But I'm not inspired by that. I want to do what's next. I want to get this out of the way and see what else is going on.
Me too.
I think my next life, I want to be on Venus.
Wait. So, is there life on other planets?
Absolutely.
Wow. Tell me more.
Think of this.
Please tell me more.
Watch this. Let's say that you can count to 10. That's the basis. And let's just look at our Milky Way. We have a galaxy that our little solar system, our little star, with 12 or 13 planets. We recognize about 9, but there's like 12 or 13 in our solar system. And in our own galaxy, there's 1.1 billion planets and stars. Then you take the gamma photographs of the Galileo telescope, the European, the Hubble telescope, and you start mapping the universe. They estimate that there's some 10 trillion galaxies. 10 trillion. But wait now, between 1 and 100 billion planets and stars per galaxy that we recognize and have photographed in this universe. So let's say you had 10 trillion with just 50 billion planets and stars. The numerical possibility of we being the only ones in the universe becomes absurd, basically numerically. Or God builds some really sloppy universes.
Wow, that is mind-boggling.
No, it's not. Well, maybe it is, but here's what I always get to. It's amazing when I hear people get so adamant. They get so adamant that they think they know what they're talking about. Well, that means they don't have the internet.
After all of your near-death experiences, what can you conclude about the purpose of life?
There's no such thing as death. It doesn't happen. Somebody made that up as a control factor. We pass from this level into another level. It's just a simple change in frequency. And think of this, Erica. We now have quantum physics. We used to have Newtonian mechanics. Then we moved into physics. Then we moved into nuclear physics. So we knew that there were subatomic, atomic, and subatomic particles. We now live in quantum reality. So living in quantum reality, if you look at the multi-universe theory in quantum reality, that means we occupy between 11 and 17 simultaneous levels of consciousness. When I heard that theory, I all of a sudden realized why I was so tired when I woke up every morning. Because if I was having half as much fun in those other 11 universes, I know as I'm having in this one, I know I would be tired. But the key is this. We have scientific, replicated theory and probability of who we are. We're living in a 2,000-year-old mindset as opposed to living in 2014 and looking at the science that says you don't die.
Right.
And if you look at quantum reality, you realize that It tells you more of the truth than anything you ever hear. No one dies. I know you don't die. I don't have faith that you don't die. I know. And and think of this too, kids. I paid dearly to have this knowledge. I live in pain today.
Really?
You can't think of this. How much electricity passed through me to weld nails of the heels of my shoes to nails in the floor? How much electricity? Look at basic lightning. Basic lightning can hit 1,000,000 volts and 50,000 amps. I know that much didn't pass through me. But when you start to look at that, you could weld the nails. I have a lot of back problems. I have a heart that works off about 70%. I have a little kidney damage on my left side. You know, I've had staph infection more than once because of the aftermath of this. So when you start to look, and when people start to tell me about they're going to die and, you know, what you're going to do, that's all funny. And I'll tell you something else, too. The innate nature of our spiritual selves within human form has the ability to accrete, to reach across the dimensions that we quote-unquote call death, and to communicate with those who have passed on. I've been with 2,008 people, so I have more friends over there than I have over here.
Awesome.
Are we a part of God, Source, all that is, infinite intelligence? And what effect do we have on life?
You are not only a part of it, you are creating it. As you listen to this show, open up your hearts and your minds to create peace and wonderment. You know, don't just sit here and worry and look at it and turn the TV off. Be a part of it and watch it manifest. Be a part of it. Smile at somebody. Say hello. Open the door. Pick somebody up. Pat them on the back. Say it's going to be okay. Because all of a sudden, one day you're going to be that person. And when you're going to be that person in the panoramic life of you, and you see the difference that you made in their life, bringing joy and happiness, support, courage, and protection into their life, then what's going to happen is you're going to feel the presence of your nature as a creator. We are all responsible for creating the world that we have lived in. And we are all responsible for creating the world that we're living in. And we're all responsible for, based on living in this world, for creating the world that our children and grandchildren will live in. I take that responsibility deep inside my heart. And I take it because I know it's the reality and the truth about who we are. We are, as you say, we are the creators. And here's my best story. Let's say you're hanging out in heaven. You're cruising around. You're floating around in some clouds, listening to some harp music. And God comes up and puts their arm around your shoulder and says, "Hey, Justin and Erica, let me ask you something. How would you like to be me for a couple of days?" And you say, "Wow, God, what a great idea. Wow, could I really be you guys for a couple of days?" "Yeah," God said, "sure. Tell me, would you really, Erica and Justin, would you really like to be me for a couple of days?" "Yeah, God, think about what I could do and be." It's like God Almighty. What I could do and be if I could be you a couple of days. And then God said, "Let me ask one more time, Justin and Erica, how would you really like to be me for a couple of days?" You say, "Yeah." Well, you know what happens next? You are born. And then all of a sudden, everything that you think God is, you have a right to be that in your life. Loving, protective, creator, just, fair, loyal, compassionate, passionate. So when you go to looking at this, you made a deal. You wanted to become a co-creator so that you could be godlike, that you could have the choices of either doing right or not. Okay? And by taking the reasons why you do it so you could emanate the divine within you. Are we all connected? Yes, divinely. How do we know that? Science has proven it.
Right.
You cannot argue with replicable science. Okay? Is there any other dimensions or worlds? Yes. How? Science has proven it. When people start talking these kinds of things, look at the science. Look at the science. just recently, they were looking at the multi-universe theory, the thing I was talking about earlier.
Right.
So they took an electron, and then on that electron, they attached what was called a tachyon, which is a subatomic particle, and they irradiated it and made it an isotope. And then they sent this electron and they bombarded it with neutrons and electrons, and it disappeared.
Right.
When they slowed down the electron bombardment, that electron reappeared in this dimension, and they knew it was that electron because it had that isotope tachyon attached to it. Okay? So all of a sudden it was back. Well, where did it go? And if it went somewhere, then how did it come back? Then did it go somewhere and did it come back? Yes. So did that prove the viability of the multi-universe theory? Did pretty well for me.
Right.
I'm not woo-woo, guys. I mean, I've been dead, but I'm obsessive compulsive. And if you kill me, you've got my attention. And if you kill me 2 or 3 times, I'm going to be an expert.
Awesome. Okay. Well,
I know I've been boring you guys for almost an hour now.
Oh, no.
You have shared a wealth of information with us today, and we really appreciate that. Where can we find some of your wonderful books?
Okay, I wrote Saved by the Light in 1993, and I'll tell you why. Because in 1993, the doubters were winning. Dr. Raymond Moody and the scientists and the philosophers who were looking at the near-death experience, the naysayers were scientific, oxygen brain deprivation, temporal lobe seizures, frontal lobe seizures, anaphylactic shock, all these reasons for what the near-death experience was, because they were afraid to have to face the fact that the entire system of their reality wasn't true, that we are really spiritual beings. I have a saying, you know the only difference between God and a doctor?
What?
God never thinks he's a doctor. Or God never thinks she's a doctor.
Right.
Now, whichever way a person wants to identify the creator. If you look like creators and you say God is he, have you ever seen a man have a baby? Okay.
Never seen it.
All right, so you have to start looking at divinity from a feminine point of view. Until you look at divinity from a feminine point of view, you never really see the magnificent miracle in art there is to this life. And if you look at gestation and the process inside of the womb and the growth of a child and the birth of that child and the kind of love and emotions that are expressed to that child and that purpose as it comes on the earth, you never really get a chance to touch what is divinity until you put a feminine focus on it. This patriarchal viewpoint that God's got to be a he and he's going to be a jealous God and all that kind of stuff, that's all nonsense. Had a feminine place to it. So they were losing. So in the course of listening to so many people whose near-death experiences, both big guys and older people and people who had tried to get everybody to understand, and nobody wanted to talk to them. They wanted to disavow it and get away from it. And what I decided to do was I didn't give a crap whether people thought I had a near-death experience or not. By the time that I wrote Saved by the Light, I had already been through 2 of them.
Wow.
And I wrote this to defend people. I wrote this book and I put myself out there. And if you go to read Saved by the Light today, you will see that the boxes of knowledge, I missed the dates because there was nothing carved in stone. So we are in control of our destiny, and we better take back control of it. And so I wrote Saved by the Light to defend people, and that's how it sold millions and millions and millions and millions of copies of books all over the world. But I wasn't so much glamorized by all of that because I know the reality. I don't impress myself because I know me too well. So, and then I wrote At Peace in the Light. Saved by the Light became a movie. It became the highest rated television movie in history. It was produced by Fox Television. It's been seen around the world in 60 countries by probably 100 million people. and it keeps selling Saved by the Light. If you go look on Amazon, I'm still in the top 1%. I wrote it Peace in the Light because I had that, being obsessive compulsive. I don't have people say it's obsessive compulsive disorder, but I don't think being obsessive compulsive is a disorder. I rather am pleased with it. So being obsessive compulsive, I had to make a plan. And I need people to be able to go from 1995 to today, because I said the battle for the souls of humankind would be fought in healthcare. And when the Affordable Health Care Act went to the Supreme Court, it verifies and proves what I wrote in a book in 1995. And then I decided to write Secrets of the Light. After spending tens of thousands of hours at the bedside, you begin to see the unique things that a person in transition from this world to the next that they need, what they have to have, and what you have to do. From me watching thousands of people, not 10 or 12 or a dozen, thousands of people go from this world to the next, what they needed. And so I'm really driven by creating and lessening the fear of death, because it doesn't ever happen, and to create a celebration of life as opposed to a funeral. I think wakes are wonderful things, except you get a hangover. But we need to celebrate life. We have a new book called 10 Things to Know Before You Go, because the Light Trilogy was Saved, At Peace, and The Secrets. And then I decided I was tired of being dead and I wanted to do some living. So we created, Catherine and I created 10 Things to Know Before You Go. And the opening of the book, it says, what's the number one cause of death in America and in most other countries? ? You turn the page and it says, no matter what you thought, the number one cause of death is birth. Then you turn to the next page and it says, remember, if you're breathing, you're leaving, and if you just took a breath, this book is for you. And the last
awesome, awesome.
And the last page, well, I figured that if a publicist was going to put that out, I'd get a lot of TV and radio. And the last page, it says, remember, aspire to inspire before you expire.
I love it, Dannion.
Well, thank you so much again, Dannion.
I love you guys, and I hope I didn't bore everybody who listens to this. Please go to Dannion.com. Please buy those books, and please get the new one.
This is Justin and Erica from You Are Creators, and we support your dreams.